Okay, we are live. All right, hey everybody, welcome to Semantic Kernel Public Community Office Hours. Again, it's a public forum, so anything you say, just make sure you're okay with saying it in public. But yeah, thank you all for showing up. We have a decently packed agenda today, primarily headlined by members of the Semantic Kernel team, Teresa and Tao, who will give the latest updates on Chat Copilot, which is our motivating sample for building a chatbot using the Semantic Kernel. So I will definitely hand off to them. But before we do that, some announcements. So we have some new blog posts, actually one new blog post, but more coming. But this one was written by Lucas. Lucas actually and his team are doing a startup called Embed Elite, and they actually were the winners of one of the categories for the Semantic Kernel Hackathon. And yeah, they wrote up this nice blog post showcasing their product and integrating with the Semantic Kernel. So definitely check that out. And again, if you or your colleagues want to potentially write something and have it featured on our dev blog, we are more than happy to work with you, collaborate with you to get that featured. I've learned today that a decent chunk of the worldwide audience actually looks at this dev blog. So yeah, you will get a lot of exposure if you write for us. Anyway, that's just a pitch.
And you have APAC office hours now too. So
Yes, that's actually, I didn't even actually include that in this announcement. So yes, good point. So we are going to be launching APAC office hours for that region at a time friendly to them. If I remember, it could be scheduled for 7 p.m. Pacific, so whatever that translates to in that region. But that will be headlined by members of the Cloud Solution Architect team at Microsoft. I may pop in every so often if I have nothing else to do. But yes, that will be a different office hours for for that audience. So yeah, if you're in that area, for people who are listening to this call remotely or after the fact, yes, definitely add that to your calendar if that's a better time for you to meet with people and ask questions. Okay, one thing I wanted to call out, which is another thing from the community, not on our dev blog, but it's on the Towards Data Science Medium blog. But it's a very well-known blog that has a lot of readers from the data science community looking at it. So Chris Hughes, actually, he is part of the, I want to get the names right, Industrial Solutions Engineering team at Microsoft. He wrote this actually pretty extensive post on using the Python version of the semantic kernel. And yeah, I would definitely, I'll leave it in the chat. And for those who want to take a look, definitely do so. But I view it as it's quite in depth, and yeah, he does a good job explaining the core concepts. So again, check it out, and we welcome again more of these type of organic content from you all. Okay, so some of the latest. So the latest packages actually, I made the Python and .NET bigger because they have the biggest changes. Java has remained the same for now, but in the .NET side, if you look at it, actually I have, if you go to our releases, you can see this more directly. But we have several breaking changes. So if you're going to be pulling the latest .NET NuGet package, you want to make sure that you account for these breaking changes. But it does have some new things, which one thing that is important to call out because it's also in the Python side is adding chat system messages to your completion settings, which if that flew over your head, it's basically like if you're wanting to use a chat model, right? So far, the semantic kernel has effectively wrapped that to the text completion model and more or less assumed a default system message. And we know that, especially as these chat completion models are more and more popular, that, yeah, as developers, you probably want to have more control over the system setting and have that be modifiable. So for both Python and C#, that is there today. So you can check that out. And let's see, anything else to call out here? Some additional connectors, updates to samples, cosine distance for Azure Cognitive Search. Anyway, I'll leave you all to read the release notes. But yes, check those out and give us feedback on what works well, what breaks, and any new things that we need to fix or add. All right, some new videos that have come out. So I believe I shared this in the Discord, but one of our team members, Dimitro, he wrote a new planner actually. And the gist of this planner is being able to automatically create a PowerShell script to complete the task or the goal. And I think PowerShell, you could substitute that as a placeholder for anything, right? This is just the example, but it could be Python, it could be Bash, it could be whatever scripting language you use. But think of it as, oh, you're giving, the ability for a planner to, write code to solve the problem. So I think that is a interesting, development or path for future planning capabilities. The other thing to call out is I talked to, or we featured Fabric, at least on the dev blog a while back. So I posted a kind of a walkthrough of Fabric and Semantic Kernel on my YouTube. So talking with the author of the original blog post and doing a kind of a live demo with that. So if you're interested, if you're using Microsoft Fabric, which the short version is, it is Microsoft's unified data lake for integrating all your different data sources. Yeah, definitely check that out. And the other one that's just more relevant for just pure open source and pure third party is Quadrant, right? So I talked with Casper from the developer relations team or developer advocate team at Quadrant, and we did a good intro to what using the Quadrant vector database with semantic kernel looks like, and a good follow-on discussion of the future of these embedding vector sort of applications beyond just RAG and the RAG pattern. Okay, to call out one more time, I shared this last week, but still good to share this out because it is a big collaboration, right? We did this with Andrew Ng and the deeplearning.ai platform to have a semantic kernel course. It's very much a intro beginner course, but I think it's really good for people, especially if you have business stakeholders, to understand the concepts, right? It's positioned as like even I think the example was like a pizza chef, right? Even a pizza chef can make use of AI for his or her own business planning. So yeah, check out this course, and give us feedback on that. Okay, so with that, I'm actually going to hand off first to Teresa, who will give us and walk us through some of the latest and greatest in Chat Copilot. So Teresa, go ahead. Oh, muted.
Hi, guys. Okay,
Howdy.
so let me share my screen. Can you guys see this?
Yep.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. I can't really see my Teams message, so Alex, I'll count on you for highlighting any questions that we have in the chat or any comments. So what we've done since the last Copilot chat update, and the one I'm referring to is the 3 video walkthrough that I did with Alex back in June or July. So a lot of updates have been made to Chat Copilot to kind of simplify the experience and make it more plugin oriented. So the first one that we did was we now have this new settings dialog where you can kind of turn on and off some features that you don't want to use for Chat Copilot. And that includes like the multi-user chat and like live sharing. One thing I'll call out here is we implemented this reinforcement learning from human feedback. This is only on the front end, and it's basically just to show like if you can like upvote or downvote some of the messages. And in theory, if you were to implement this, you would hook up this kind of feedback to your backend to be able to train your model. This isn't hooked up in Chat Copilot right now. We just wanted to showcase that as a suggested LLM design for your application. So the settings dialog is all front end. So this just controls the features that you as the user will see on the front end. And then you'll also be able to see your different versions now from the back end and the front end. I'm running locally, so it doesn't have a version. And if you want to see all the features from Chat Copilot before, you can just turn this off, and then it gives you everything that you were used to whenever Chat Copilot first launched. One thing you'll notice too is that we also now show token usage. So if you're looking at it from the settings dialog, it will show you your token usage for the entire session that you've been on the web app. So like, for instance, when you're running it locally, this clears out every time you kill the app and do yarn start again. And it is broken down by each kind of hop that we make to the LLM back in the web API. And we don't have planner usage yet, but it will be coming soon. And so that's the gist of it. You can also see it in the prompt dialog. And this is the token usage that's specific to the response that was generated for that message. Okay, so I'll stop there. Any questions? Cool. And then, so the next big thing that we introduced was custom plugins. So now you can just port your ChatGPT manifest file into Chat Copilot and test it pretty easily. There are some limitations in that we only support plugins that don't require auth or require like basic user HTTP auth, and that means something like a personal access token that you can pass in. And let me get a plugin that we can use. So our PM Matthew built this math plugin since the LLM can't do math that well. And so you would be hosting your manifest file as defined by OpenAI at some domain, and then you pass this domain in, and then it will it will fetch the manifest file, validate that it has all the proper fields specified, as well as the Open API spec. And then when you add it, it becomes a part of this plugin gallery. This isn't persistent right now. It's only to the session that you're using the web app. So be mindful of that. And then in order to use it, you have to explicitly enable it. And then you can ask it to use whatever it needs to. And it should schedule that plugin and then come back with us for an answer. I currently have the stepwise planner running, so it might take a little bit longer than if you were using action planner or sequential planner. So we can come back to that. So any questions about the plugins so far?
You meant like an auth token on the header, right? Like that works is kind of what I heard you say.
Yeah, so if you guys have played around with the GitHub plugin at all, basically it'll ask you for your personal access token, and then you can input it that way. And so if your manifest specified a user HTTP, it will automatically pull up this UX for you whenever you add your plugin to the plugin gallery.
Yeah, like a Hugging Face token or something. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, and then so that's basically the gist of the custom plugins. I can walk through some of the code if you guys are interested in that. I have some of the files pulled up, but I'll move ahead with the other features that we have. So like I mentioned earlier, I have stepwise planner running. So the other big improvement we made to Chat Copilot was stabilizing the planners. So the action planner and the sequential planner. And then we introduced support for the stepwise planner. And the stepwise planner is super awesome. Like it's able to generate user inputs based on kind of this like feedback learning loop that it makes off of these observations. So it goes through this loop of like a chain of like thought, action, and observation until it's able to get a correct answer. There's Alex has a video on his channel with Lee walking through this, but you can see here we have it in the prompt dialog under the planner results section. And basically it will list out all the steps that the stepwise planner has taken in order to get the answer. So in this case, the planner is only invoked if you have a plugin enabled. So it starts off with the question, and that's basically the user intent. So it has all of this context. And then for the action, it sees that, oh, like I have this plugin that I can use to get the final answer. And then it schedules this action. It works like the other planners where it schedules the variables and it populates it on what it thinks it's right. And then unlike the other planners, though, you're not able to approve the steps like as it takes them just because the stepwise planner is iterative. So it's just like loops back on itself, and then it's able to get that final answer. So anytime you're using the stepwise planner, you're able to see its thought process in the prompt dialog, regardless of whether it receives a result or not. Yeah, and then so this is just merely for informational purposes. So dev have more understanding on how it works, but it's not actually passed into like the meta prompt. The only thing that's passed into the meta prompt is the answer that it got from the stepwise planner. Yeah, so
Teresa, before you move on, you mentioned
Yeah.
some work that you did, probably more behind the scenes of stabilizing the planner. Can you walk
yeah,
through some of that?
Yes, I will get to that because that was more so on the action and sequential planner side. So I will get to that in just a moment. But I'll continue with stepwise planner here because I wanted to call out the fact that stepwise planner right now doesn't work that well with plugins that return a large API response. So if you get a huge JSON, because that response is passed back to the planner, it can easily exceed like token limits. So just be careful about that whenever you're using the stepwise planner. But it still is super fun and useful to use, especially if you need kind of like that feedback loop for additional user input, or if you enable a plugin like Bing so it can do like live web search in order to do it. So
Plus we have the quadrant thing, right? For like writing out like your context window to like a vector DB if you wanted to.
yeah,
Right? So
yeah,
you
yeah.
don't have to, yeah.
So I won't be showing action planner or sequential planner at this point, but I'll go back to like the stabilization that we did. So if you go over to app settings, you'll see the planner like options section here. And by default, sequential planner is enabled. So if you want to change it, you can just change it to stepwise or action on whatever you want to play around with. I will say sequential planner and action planner works best with GPT-3.5 Turbo with a relevancy threshold set or GPT-4. And the stabilization that we did was one, this missing functions error. Because the planner is basically a call to the LLM to generate a suggested plan, it can sometimes hallucinate functions that it thinks will add value. For instance, like we've seen it hallucinate the function like filter because it's trying to like filter out the response of the plugin. But we added this skip function to allow that planner to essentially bypass the hallucinated functions when serializing the plans. Otherwise, it would just error out and it would throw an exception that says, oh, this function isn't available in the kernel. We can't create a plan right now. So by allowing skips, we allow it to schedule these missing functions, and then we filter it out from the serialized plan. And this was purely for stabilization. We're working on the hallucination part. And this one is allow retries on invalid plans. So again, because it is a response from the LLM, sometimes it can come back with like a natural language preamble that says, oh, a suggested plan is this, and then give the JSON. Or sometimes it will just say, oh, these are the steps that you can take in natural language. So we found that if we allow retries, this by default is only one retry, then it will return back a valid JSON or a valid object that can be serialized rather than it can't serialize a natural language plan. And then this config is just like up to you on how much you want the stepwise planner to run and use. So that's pretty much it for the planner stabilization stuff. We have seen some errors where it will throw an error about like token exceeded limit, but that's more so on the model. And if you just try to resend the message, it should be a transient one. So that's it. Any questions for planner or stepwise planner?
So like the feedback thing is literally just like a JSON, like a link to a UUID for a JSON on the thing, or like are you guys planning to do like an actual pipeline to help build like a direct preference optimization like data set for like continual fine tuning? And I'm not saying y'all have to do that. I'm saying like that's like I just didn't yet. So
No, yeah, no, heard. We are not planning to build that pipeline because we don't really train our models specifically, but we just wanted to showcase that because it is a pretty relevant LOM design to be able to give your like users the option to kind of cater the responses that the model gets. So we just wanted to show that for demonstration purposes only, but there's no hookup to the backend, and we're not planning to do any kind of like pipeline to set that up with the model.
cool. I think Alessandro had some. Go for it.
Oh, me?
Yeah, you said you had like a question related to this in
yeah.
MapReduce.
So I watched a video yesterday that talked about using MapReduce to parallelize the work on large inputs, and maybe when they are re-examining it in the outputs of this thing. And your JSON comments about the size of the input and output made me think about that. Is there anything related or something about that? Or can be done? I don't know.
Oh, I don't know. I have not heard of that, but I will look into it. Can you drop a link to like the post or what you were referencing?
Yes. I think it's actually already in the Semantic Kernel news group, but I'll point you to that, later.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I just got back from vacation, so still trying to catch up.
Thank you.
So that I understand the intent, like and down for the docs too, you're saying like using MapReduce or something to like distill like a context window to be smaller, or to like process it like outside of like to like a distributed series of LLMs and like give it like a substring. I guess I misunderstood kind of what it's doing.
It's, imagine you have large, I don't know, gigabytes of text, okay, inputted. What that thing is about finding a way to split and chunk, very similar to RAG and that kind of thing, but with the purpose of having parallel containers or whatever it is calculate, and then they reduce some more and start another cycle of this. So basically what they're saying is the larger the prompt, the slower the LLM seems to behave, or less precise in some cases, and this addresses that, plus the scalability issue of large data and large prompts.
I'm down. I'm interested. I also wonder like how much of that is a function of like U-shaped attention versus like using something like Tiny Llama, I think. Let me pull it up real fast. But like as a way to pre-process and get a sense for stuff beforehand. Let me put that in the chat rather than like have y'all like wait while I Google stuff or big stuff. So thanks, dude.
Yeah, I think it's an overall good question. Just handling big data, right? Even in a non-LLM setting, handling big data is a challenge. So if anything, if we've learned anything over the past decade, you can probably use some of those patterns that you used to solve those old problems and see if they fit for this new one. But yeah, I mean, whether it's a MapReduce pattern or something else.
Pre-processing with a tiny model, a lot of ways to do a thing. So thanks, Alessandro.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, guys. Does anybody have any other questions before I move on? Okay, and then so the last thing is delete chat is now in Chat Copilot. And what delete chat will do is it deletes all the resources. That includes like the memories, the documents, the messages, everything when you delete it. And if you're using multi-user chat, it deletes it for all users. And any user can delete it. I think that's, oh, the last one, sorry. The last one is now, you guys have probably noticed you don't have to log in initially to Chat Copilot right now. It defaults to guest mode. So how this works in the back end is we just have this guest user GUID, like a static GUID that we use for all users. So then this should help with some of the kind of like boilerplate stuff that you had to set up in order to get into Chat Copilot. But if you do want to use it, there are instructions in the repo in order to enable it. You can't use Graph without being logged in. Yep, that's it. I will hand it over to Tao now.
Great. Thank you so much, Teresa, and welcome back from vacation.
How you muted if you.
All right, cool. Thank you, Teresa. Nice presentation. Let me share my screen. All right, Alex, I'm also counting on you to take questions or stop me anytime. I also cannot see Teams. Yep, today I will be showing kind of the current state of semantic memory integration into Copilot Chat. For those who, I'm not sure how much you have heard about semantic memory, but for those who haven't heard of semantic memory is a new project from the semantic kernel team that kind of to enhance the data-driven features or experience in applications built with SK. Including, so the semantic memory project is kind of like a pipeline that you can use to generate memory, semantic memory from basically any files, right? The text documents, PDF, images, or emails, or videos, anything. And then it takes care of indexing, querying, generating embeddings, and then storing embeddings into databases. And then when you query, the memory, it includes citations, like data sources of, where you based on the question and query that you provided, which sources matches the what sources match the best match your query. I will paste this link into the chat later. So I encourage everyone to take a look at this project. Actually, I will do it now. So that so there are two kind of things I want to talk about in this semantic memory package or service. The first thing is the concept of a pipeline. You can define your own pipeline before in semantic text memory in SK, or if you're importing a document in Chat Copilot. The only thing it does is it kind of extracts the text from the document, like PDF or images, and then it chunked the text and then generate embedding and save embeddings. But right now with this pipeline, you can define your own steps. For example, if you want to generate additional information, like if you want synthetic data from the document, say you provide a document and then you want to ask the LLM what are the most likely questions people will ask that this piece of document will provide best answer for, then you can kind of insert this step into the pipeline as for the pipeline to generate those synthetic data. And yeah, so so there's the concept of pipeline, and then you can define your own steps. And then the nice thing about the pipeline is it doesn't have to be written in C#. So if you can define your pipeline step in any language. And then the second one is the second concept I want to talk about is the async mode and serverless mode. So semantic memory in serverless mode, it's kind of you're running the pipeline in your application. So this is a blocking operation. But then you also have the option to run semantic memory as a service, a distributed service. So you upload a document and then this service is hosted somewhere, and then it takes the document or underneath it's using a queue mechanism to process the data, to process the messages. So you upload a message. Well, you upload a document is actually putting a message into the queue, and then the pipeline would just grab the message and then start processing, so that you don't have to wait for the pipeline to finish to continue your other tasks. Yeah, and there are plenty of examples in this repository to go over, how you could define your own pipeline, or how you could define your own pipeline handler, aka step, or how you could launch the service in serverless mode or async mode. But then right now I will go to Copilot chat and then show you the current states of the integration. From the UI, you cannot see anything different, but I will mostly show you the citation that's right now. So I will upload 2 documents, and then I will ask a question, and then it should give you the citation of where it get the information from. So currently the links don't work, but we're still working on making them valid links. But then, as you can see, the name of the sources come from semantic memory, so it's not coming from the prompt or anything. Although it does include the prompt does include the name of the file, but then it's not from the prompt. It's a new object that's returned from the backend of Chat Copilot, but Chat Copilot got it from semantic memory. And then right now, the current state is, so whatever is included, whatever is returned from semantic memory will be shown in here. So whether or not the bot actually used that source, it will include the document in here. So for example, if I say, if I ask what's the name of my pet, it will probably fetch the information from my friend's pet.txt, but then the answer doesn't necessarily, the answer won't contain my friend's pet's name, but it will still include source 1. So we're still working on how to make it more, I guess, more intelligent to figure out whether to figure out how to only include the sources that the bot actually uses in its response. So yeah, so that's the current state of the semantic memory. Well, a brief introduction of semantic memory and the current state of the integration work into Chat Copilot. We are hoping to get this work merged well, optimistically by the end of this week, but then maybe by the end of this sprint. So yep, that's my presentation. Giving back to you, Alex.
Yeah, that's really good, Tao. And I think we have some questions in the chat from the audience. But I guess first, before going to those, I think it's very early days for semantic memory. I've teased it in previous office hours, but it's a project that is rapidly being worked on, just like semantic kernel. And yeah, hopefully, right, you all can give us the feedback. Pass it along to Tao and the team to make it better and make sure it solves your use cases. So in terms of questions that I see, so I see Michael asking, is unstructured being used for processing under the hood?
Sorry, what was the question? Unstructured?
Unstructured. Actually,
could you elaborate on what that means?
Yeah, Michael, could you come off mute and elaborate? If you're able to. Okay, we'll come back to you, Michael, if you're back. Okay, the next question then from Alessandro is, how can we do stuff like Elasticsearch highlights? Basically, what portion of the given result is why you picked the text or whatever. No, so yeah, so I like this question because I've seen it in other products where not only does it return the citation of the overall document, but imagine it's like this huge document, right? You really want to just know like which paragraph or which portion of the text directly is contributing to the answer to your question. So I guess Tao, or have you and the team investigated this piece?
Yeah, so when you submit a query to semantic memory, it doesn't, so the citation is an object that contains a bunch of partitions. So you can kind of think of citation as the entire document, and then underneath it, it has like a bunch of partitions. So the partitions are little chunks of the document. So when we get back the answer, it contains the partition. So we know which partition has the highest relevancy score.
Right.
And it also returns the relevancy score. So we do know why it picked those.
Let me give you an example that works with that. So this would be basically the results of the text chunker, like, I don't know, 20, 30 words. They individually are indexed separately. So when it comes back, I have these 15 words, so to say, in which there is dogs, plural, but my search text was dogs, singular. The AI picked up these variations and stuff, but I don't know how to generate an highlight. John is picked up, or John's, that kind of stuff inside the chunk.
I mean, you could pass the partition back to the language model and ask it, like, is it's based, maybe I'm being reductive, but like 5 years ago when we had like an unstructured model that looked at a document to try to determine like if we were going to win, like, this is going to be boring insurance stuff, so never mind. But like, basically, would you win a lawsuit, right? And we had like an RNN that would highlight the substring for this reason specifically, because like deep learning models are hard to interpret. If you already have like the UID, like for the partition, pass that like substring back to the model for that partition and ask the model to identify what it thinks was, useful in predicting based on that partition. That feels like both efficient from a token perspective, and yeah. I don't mean to like throw out ideas or solutions. Sorry. So.
Would you say that basically I need another step through the LLM, or maybe another model that is capable of doing like the re-ranking one, to basically adjust this?
I'm saying like RNN just because I'm always paranoid about like attack strings or whatever. Like that's part of why like Alex has heard me talk about that to no end. But I'm saying like we just happened to use an RNN like 5 years ago because we didn't have like LLMs, right? And so if we can like surface like the partition, then we could just like pass like the substrings within that partition back to the model and say, hey, this was, where the bulk or the top 5 like partitions where your result came from. Can you help me understand what in this partition like was useful in making your determination, right? So
Not really. Okay, I could look into that.
Tao, does that make sense? Am I like talking out of thin air? Like, I feel like that makes sense, but
I thought we're doing something that's on top of what we're doing, right? You're building something that you want the AI to highlight, to generate its own thinking. So
like Elasticsearch would give this highlight as form of HTML that then you can use, like Google hints, basically.
Yeah, I'm saying the semantic search thing is literally what we did, in that we had like an HTML file that we like had to split across two Netezza columns because of the length of the URL, right? I'm saying that's literally what semantic kernel or semantic search does. And I'm proposing what sounds like a better way to do that, but is still token efficient insofar as if you know like what partitions like were most used, right? You return that at the end of like your result set. Then you say, all right, cool. Now I'm going to go into the DB, look at these partitions, pull the substrings back, and have the language model interpret based on like the previous context why those strings were important. Forgive me for not being clear earlier. So.
Right. Okay.
Alex is just nodding, being polite, but I'll stop. So.
What? Perfect. Thank you, sir.
No, there's a good discussion, and yeah, go ahead, Tao. If you have something more you wanna.
Oh yeah, I think that's definitely a good idea, or a good direction to explore. Because under the hood right now, semantic memory is only doing cosine similarity. That's it. It's not something that fancy.
Fancy is overstated, right? Like I can't even pronounce malhabendwa distance, right? Even if I kind of know how conformal prediction works. So don't worry about it, dude.
I think in the future, one direction, as I mentioned, is synthetic data, right? So before you even ask a question or provide a query, it kind of, anticipate what you're going to ask. So and then it do the matches based on the synthetic questions, and then use that to provide the answer, or use that to do the search. That's something that I think it's in the mind of Davis, which is the main contributor to semantic.
Cool. And primarily as like warming the cache, or like what? And forgive me.
No, because sometimes when you do a similarity, cosine similarity match, the question you ask doesn't really match the answer. Doesn't really necessarily have a higher score. So if you pre-generate the questions, maybe a question matching a question will give you back better result.
No, I got you. I literally built like a windowing function as like one of the first things that I like brought with me here. Yeah, using like a whatever the elastic cache. Yeah, so cool.
Okay, so Michael actually sent over what unstructured is, and actually thank you for sending the link, because now I know what you're talking about. So yes, unstructured IO is, I believe it's a startup actually, but they have an open source product where it's about sort of working with different document types, whether, you mentioned PDFs, HTML, Word docs, and just creating the components of pre-processing them, including, they say, partition, cleaning, staging. So, maybe Tao, you want to pass this back to the team to say like, hey, should we look at this some more? Should we maybe use this as one of the utilities for semantic memory? Because they probably have solved a lot of problems that maybe you are all encountering. So
yeah, that's well, I haven't heard of this, but it's something that eventually we'll be working on. So it's good to have some reference and maybe discuss whether we could just take it.
Cool. And Michael asked this follow-up question, which is, when we're creating this function pipeline, can you talk about whether functions are variadic or unary? Are there any combinators provided by default? Okay, Michael, you used 3 big words. I think I know what they mean, but if you want to elaborate some more, if your connection came back. Otherwise. how or what?
For me, very erratic kind of. I came from a C++ background. That takes like variable arguments, right? Is this what it means in this context, or?
Yes.
Okay. The functions are no. So I don't think it. How to say this? The functions read stuff. Well, the pipelines. So there is a so you can customize the pipeline steps. You still have to how do I put this? So so there are data structures that constrain like how you need to define your pipeline step. So it's not like you can run any function in your pipeline. It needs to take certain arguments in your function. Does that answer your question?
Maybe it's best to talk offline or on Discord about this some more.
Cool. Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's see. I'm trying to scroll. Any other questions? For the audience, while we have Tao and Teresa here, the experts of
Can we
Chat
just like
Copilot.
straight up ask for that like citation thing being built into semantic memory? Like I'll beg. I have no shame. Like that sounds like a neat way to do it, right? I'm with like Alessandro on like there being fuzzy matching and all kinds of other semantic and lexical grounding when you're trying to be like really careful, right? And Colin would get mad at me if I like say that cosine similarity is enough, but basically like even just having like native to semantic kernel or like Chat Copilot for Bing, the ability to document or index a document and then like have basically like a pattern for how you retrieve the citation seems like it would be useful and still be token efficient. So like I'd be happy to write up a white paper if like you need like a product to ask or something. That feels like super useful. So
that looks really great. I mean, it seems exactly what we would need. We have a repo we just published this weekend. It's called videomatic.net, and in there are some diagrams that shows how the whole project is based on integration with semantic kernel and this kind of issues, chunking and selecting things appropriately are all parts of that.
Yes, and actually, in terms of a transition, because we haven't gone over the questions that came in, and I see Alessandro actually submitted. We actually only have two, but Alessandro asked several questions. I don't even know if we have enough time to go over them properly. So,
yeah,
Alessandro, how about let's do this next week?
Yeah, totally fine, and yeah, absolutely.
Okay, but I'll answer this one that came from Basio. So Basio asks, are there any plans to add support for guardrails, like when using RAG to validate the generated response is factually correct? So the context is, it's very common that RAG retrieves unrelated chunks in response to the user query, but for the LLM, they form related statements that can lead to a very wrong answer. We need to have a way to validate the correctness of the answer. Okay, there's a very good question. I think if any of you have been building these sort of things for a while now, you'll probably encounter some form of this. If guardrails is referring to like the guardrails library, that it's a decently popular one that's out there.
I don't think he was asking that because like
yeah.
I was wondering if semantic was going to be y'all's version of Nemo or whatever, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, I think libraries aside, right? All those can be brought in as a plugin. That's your choice as a developer to use. But yes, overall guardrails as a concept, yes, we view this as important. We will want to bring more of this into the semantic kernel, either directly or maybe as a service. I don't know. But yeah, we will see. what it looks like. In terms
I know you
of,
guys are going to come back to it next
go
week, but I really do think those two questions are the same thing, right? In terms of like, if you're looking for a way to avoid an API call, right? Or not have to like reprocess a ton of stuff that you've already like pulled into memory, right? If you know what indexes were brought forward in like retrieving that answer, just having the model like iterated again in order to figure out like why it thought that was useful, both would improve like its propensity to hallucinate, because you're basically giving it like a chain of thought to follow, right? Like I'm happy to like prove that instead of just say it, but I think that's the thing. So, and like you said, otherwise it's a plugin, right? Whether for Nemo or something else. So.
Yeah, again, this topic deserves proper treatment or more in-depth treatment. If any of you all actually have solved this in some way or have some concrete ideas, I think this would be a great blog post topic, if you want to contribute something. So, but yeah, short answer is more work needs to be done to make sure the answers are correct. The challenge is just to even just state it is factually correct, right? The model, you relying on the model purely as a determiner of truth or fiction, I think it's very, you're going into some like potentially dangerous territory, right? And it's maybe even a philosophical question because, yeah, like the model has effectively ingested the bulk of human knowledge up to some cutoff, and factually correct can mean one thing or the other depending on who you're talking to. So I think the earlier point about like even what Teresa showed off with some of the features of upvoting and providing the human feedback, I think that is a more steerable way to build a large language model application, maybe using a fine-tuned model to more give you like what you want or have it do the type of things that you deem as correct in your setting. Okay, this is good. I see a good comment from Anthony. Anthony, if you want to just for the people who don't have access to the chat, can just hear the comment. If you want to come off mute and share it, I think it's helpful.
Sorry. This is a little out of context just because I'm a super slow typer and I was looking for the cognitive search article link. But just going back to the topic of being able to figure out relevant, whether it's document partitions or stuff like that, it over more than just semantic search. Things like Azure Cognitive Search already utilize, I think it's called RRF, to rescore hybrid queries. So if you tag your document partitions via, let's say, user, or you have some sort of other index fields in your search index, you can search on those as well as doing that common, cosine similarity diff on your embeddings. So it really, in my case at least, it really enhances being able to search because now I can do faceted searches. And I'm not relying on just these real small partitions. And Azure Cognitive Search is super fast, like a couple hundred milliseconds to do all that. So it's speaking from my experience, it's been a great use case so far.
You found that language models are pretty good at like adding like creative tags, right?
I haven't dived into that too much. A lot of this is literally just extracting, real basic things like document.
Oh no, yeah, I'm with you on terms of like use additional like metadata, right? And so it's not just cosine similarity when you're pulling back or like doing your retrieval. I got really excited because I thought you were saying that like in doing your like indexing, you'd have the model also go in and like add like tags to a given partition. So cool.
Oh, I've experienced with it a bit, not on like an enterprise level or anything like that. For if you're interested in doing that, I did a bit with GPT 3.5 was actually pretty good. The OpenAI function calling and actually asking it to extract entities because it's all structured for you. You don't get that chat response back like 80% of the time, even though you tell it no chit chat or anything like that. That was pretty useful at extracting entities. I would be willing to bet that in a lot of cases, especially for faceted search, whether it's like a store that's selling T-shirts or something like that, if you have a schema, you can pass the model and say, hey, extract relevant entities. Here's a list of existing categories, and drop this document partition into one of those. That would be I'm just thinking out loud here.
It tracks. No, like, because right now I do it with like a textract, right? But like I have to call the API twice to do like topic modeling or topic and sentiment modeling, right? And it's cool that I can stuff it in DynamoDB or whatever. But yeah, calling like the language model itself to do the NER would be like preferable. So thanks, dude. It's a cool idea.
Great. Well, thank you, Anthony, for sharing that. And yes, with that, we are actually at time. I think time flew by very quickly. So thank you all for this. Thank you, Tao, Teresa, for walking us through Chat Copilot. And yes, for everyone who showed up live, asked good questions. We are wrapped for today, but see you all in future office hours. All right.